welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special. I'm Shireen Bhan and we're joined by the chairman of the TRAI, Mr. SHARMa. Mr. SHARMa, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. I know you're constrained because the matter that I'm going to talk to you about is sub judice, but nevertheless, let me ask you to comment on the observations that were made by the Supreme Court yesterday. On the back of what our court reporters are reporting, and I'm going to quote what they said, the Supreme Court observed yesterday that it appears that nobody had seen the technical papers on the day of framing the regulations. You passed the order on the call drop penalty in October. A technical paper of the TRAI was released a month later, which suggested that call drops are not necessarily only on account of poor quality of service providers. The court then also goes on to say, please tell us in an affidavit whether you will consider amending the regulation or you still want to stand by them. Is there scope, sir, for reconsideration at all?
Well, let me first preface by saying that because the matter is sub judice, pending before the apex court of the country, it will not be appropriate for me to make any kind of observations. The only observation which I can make is that the orders of the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court, shall be carried out in letter and spirit. That's what I can say.
Which means that you will be filing an affidavit? You will not tell us
Whatever has been ordered by the Honorable Supreme Court shall be complied with.
Okay. Let me then ask you, sir, about the points that the Supreme Court raises, and I'll ask you to comment on that. And that is the argument that the telecom companies have also made in court as part of their representation. And this is something that your own technical paper also highlights in the month of November, that call drops could not be blamed merely on service providers. There are a whole bunch of other issues. Would you at least agree that perhaps there is room to reconsider, given the fact that telecom service providers are not only to blame for the call drop situation?
Well, Shireen, as I said to you, it is a matter pending in the court, and whatever arguments will be made on the side of from behalf of TRAI will be made in the court of law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But do you believe that this has maybe pushed you on the back foot? It is a little bit of an embarrassment, at least as far as the TRAI is concerned?
I will refrain from making any comments whatsoever on that issue, except that the Honorable Supreme Court's orders shall be complied with.
Let me ask you about what the situation currently looks like as far as call drops are concerned, sir. You've had the telecom operators provide you with data. You've done your own audit in the month of December, January, if I remember correctly. We didn't show any significant improvement. Where do things currently stand today?
Well, we are going to conduct another test in the next month, that is month of April. And we'll find out, because we do periodic tests in a number of cities, and the last time we did in 7 of them. And we'll find out whether there has been any significant improvement or not. As you rightly said, there was no improvement when the tests were done in December. Mm-hmm. Let's see whether there's any improvement. Has
there been any improvement in the situation where cell towers have been sealed, where the government has said that, you can set up towers on government land? Have you seen any follow-up action on that front?
Well, as I said, this is an issue which is pending in the Supreme Court, and therefore making any substantive statement on or any argument.
But you can give us an update, sir, on whether or not the government's intent of government land being used to set up towers has been followed through on.
The basic argument which I can say that nowhere in the licensing condition of the telecom service providers is it provided that the government will make the land available for the towers, or government will make the other kinds of things.
But that telecom minister has gone on record to say that they will do that.
No, that's fine. That could be a facilitation, but essentially it's not a part of the contract. And essentially, when you have a legal issue, you go by contract.
So you're saying it's not part of the contract, but the government has said it also wants to play facilitator in this matter. So can we expect some forward movement? Because this has been a conversation that has been had between telecom operators, the government, the regulator for over 6 months now, sir.
No, let me put it this way. Again, I would have had conversations on this issue, but in a different context or different time, but not at this moment where the case is pending before the Supreme Court.
Okay, let me then move on and talk to you about another issue which is not pending before the Supreme Court, at least not yet. And that is the issue as far as the auction is concerned and the pricing for the 700 megahertz band. Has there been any further conversation between you and the government? Because again, reports seem to suggest that the DOT panel has found some issues with the methodology that has been deployed as far as the 700 megahertz pricing is concerned.
Well, to my knowledge, we have not got any reference back from the DOT as of now.
So no reference back as of now. But do you believe, or do you at least take on board the reservations that have been made by industry as far as the pricing is concerned? Most saying that this will be a non-starter of an auction if the reserve price stays as is.
Well, the issue is that when the TRAI makes such recommendations relating to reserve prices, we carry out a very detailed consultation process. And the same was done and we also had an open house discussion in which various views were expressed about the, whether to auction or not to auction and what kind of reserve price should be set up. So essentially this whole process of the recommendation has been done after consulting all the stakeholders. So therefore it will not be appropriate for me to say that, whether I agree or disagree, because all those views were made before the consultation.
But stakeholders will also mean telecom service providers, sir. And telecom service providers believe that this is prohibitive and this will lead all of them to actually pause and re-evaluate even participating in the auction.
Telecom service providers are certainly the most important stakeholders in the spectrum auction. And we had, as I was saying to you, that we had consulted every telecom service provider, we have consulted every stakeholder.
And they didn't say that...
They have, ultimately in a consultation process and this kind of recommendation, one has to consider the overall sort of inputs from everybody, and that's what we have done.
So is there room, sir, for the TRAI to review this, given the negative feedback that you're getting from, as you yourself just pointed out, the most important stakeholders in this matter?
Well, negative feedback should not be a reason enough for us to review, because feedback
let me say that they're saying that the pricing isn't realistic.
It's not they versus TRAI. Essentially, there is a set rule for, sort of review of these recommendations by TRAI, which is essentially when the government, will give us a back reference. If there is any reference, we will consider it as per the set practices and procedures.
So what can we expect now as far as the auction timeline is concerned? You probably had some kind of a conversation with the government on this, even though the DOT panel hasn't come back to you with a reference on the pricing itself.
Well, the auction timelines is not really in the mandate of TRAI. It is for the government to take a call as to when they want to auction, what they want to auction.
Okay.
As far as our role is concerned, we gave a recommendation on the reserve pricing, and that's where our role ends.
You gave a recommendation on the reserve pricing, so let me take that forward and ask you for your comments on what the telecom minister, or at least the finance minister, is hoping this sector will provide by way of revenues. In the budget, a figure of 98,000 crore rupees from the telecom sector, not just by way of auctions, but on the back of what they provide to the government on an annual basis, in any case through levies, etc. Do you believe that this is going to be practical?
No, I have no comments to offer on that issue.
No, but one would imagine, and when one talks to people in private, they believe that this is a gross overestimation.
I really have no comments to make on.
You have no comments to make on whether 98,000 is
my role has ended as of now by, when we made a recommendation on the reserve pricing. Thereafter, it is the auction, the timings, what they want to auction is essentially the prerogative of the government.
Okay, let me then ask you about an issue that is your mandate, and that is to do with the net neutrality regulations. You've already put out your order as far as discriminatory pricing is concerned, and I have to say that the feedback has been very, very positive. In fact, some going to the extent to say that India may have provided the roadmap to other countries even as far as discriminatory pricing is concerned. There are some concerns, though, on that front, and that has to do with this business of the intranet loophole being misused. Your comments on that, and do you believe that that is something that there is a need to plug a possible loophole there? No,
I do not believe there is any loophole. In fact, the regulation is very clear that what cannot be discriminatorily priced. It's also very clear, and the area as to what does not fall within the mischief of the regulation or within the domain of the regulation is also very clearly defined in the regulation. So I do not think there is any scope for misinterpretation or any scope for there's any loophole.
So you believe the concern that maybe some service providers could use the intranet route to actually resort to discriminatory pricing is an exaggerated concern?
My sense is that I believe that the regulation is very clear in its intent and its language and its definitions, and there is no scope for any misinterpretation.
Okay, so what can we now expect as far as the net neutrality regulations are concerned specifically? There's this business of fast lanes, slow lanes. Regulators around the world, whether it's the FCC or it's the EU, have taken positions on that. What can we expect now as you frame the regulations here in India? Because this was a matter that was not addressed in your previous order on discriminatory pricing.
See, let me put it this way. The current regulation which the TRAI has issued essentially has dealt with certain components or aspects of net neutrality from a tariff perspective. So essentially what we have said is that you cannot discriminatorily price any data packet, the wheeling of that data packet on the basis of where this data came from, where this data is going to, and what this data contains. So these three aspects have been taken care of. However, though I will not venture to define net neutrality, but I would say there are certain other aspects which you yourself mentioned about, fast lanes or the throttling part of it. They are not directly related to tariffs, and therefore we had not taken any call on them. Recently, the Government of India has actually given us, Department of Telecom has given us a letter requesting us to provide information on a larger issue of net neutrality. And we are soon going to come out with a consultation paper where we will discuss this whole issue of what kind of framework we need to put in place in our country for net neutrality.
So when, one of the issues we've just discussed is going to be the ambit of this consultation paper, whether or not we should have fast lanes or allow for throttling at all. But what are the other aspects that you're going to look at? And I ask you this in the context of what we could expect, for instance, in the treatment of OTT players, because this has been a matter that has also come up. Should OTT players also be treated on par with service providers when it comes to at least voice calls, for instance?
See, our view is that the three issues of origin, destination and content having been taken care of in the discriminatory pricing regulation, whatever are the residual issues of net neutrality, they will certainly be taken into account in the consultation paper which is coming forward. And what we are proposing is that the issues of OTT, issues of the DOT committee on net neutrality had also brought out a paper. All these will be taken as inputs and feedbacks while proceeding forwards on this whole issue of net neutrality.
But do you think that there is merit in the argument the telecom service providers are making when it comes to OTT players, the WhatsApps and the Vibers of the world, saying that at least as far as voice calls are concerned, let there be parity?
Well, this is again an issue which will be decided out of consultation. So we will have a consultation on all these issues of throttling, fast lanes and other kinds of whatever related issues fall within the overall ambit of net neutrality. We will have consultation, and I'm sure we will be able to come out with a couple of months the broad kind of framework which we will propose to the government.
So you're saying it will take at least a couple of months?
It will, because ultimately the consultation will probably take another 15 days to come out, because we are formulating the issues. Thereafter we'll have to take 1 month's period approximately for comments, and then counter comments, then open house discussions and whatever. So the whole consultation process of TRAI will take about 2-3 months.